Hi everyone, this is Matthew Linton from the Council of Graduate Schools, and this is the webinar, Crossing the Finish Line, Strategies to Support Doctoral Completion. The broadcasting of today's webinar is brought to you by Doctoral.net. We'd like to thank Doctoral.net for its participation in the CGS Sustaining Member Network as a small business partner, which allows companies to demonstrate their commitments to advancing graduate education. Today's webinar will feature two presentations. The first presentation will be by Janet Rutledge, Vice Provost and Dean of the Graduate School at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And her presentation will be followed by a presentation from Jan Allen, Associate Dean for Academic and Student Affairs at Cornell University. The plan for today is that there will be three speakers who will talk for approximately 45 minutes, followed by a question and answer session. The first speaker will be Julia Kent of the Council of Graduate Schools, who will speak for approximately 5 minutes, introducing the topic and speaking on CGS resources about supporting doctoral completion. Her introduction will be followed by Janet Rutledge, who will speak for 15 to 20 minutes on programs to support doctoral completion at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, focused on the comprehensive approach to ensuring graduate student success. Finally, Jan Allen of Cornell University will close by speaking for 15 to 20 minutes about programs on her campus, including crucial intervention points to support completion. Just a few technical reminders before we get into the presentations. Webinar recording and slides will be emailed to registrants and posted on the CGS website within 1 week of the live webinar. Please submit any questions to the GoToWebinar control panel on your right. Questions can be submitted at any time during the webinar, but questions will only be answered during the question and answer session at the end of the presentations. If you're having any technical issues, troubleshooting help is available at the URL below. The most common issue that we have with webinars is people having trouble hearing. So if you're having trouble hearing us, try switching to a different audio connection. You can change from telephone to mic and speakers or vice versa without leaving the session, as shown in the image on the right. If you experience trouble with a telephone connection, click Problem Dialing In for an alternate number to dial. And with that, I'd like to hand over the presentation to my colleague, Julia Kent.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to introduce our excellent speakers on the topic of crossing the finish line. And I'd like to preface their presentations with a few remarks about CGS's investments in this work and some resources that are available to you following the webinar. As many of you know, CGS best practice initiatives address all parts of the student life cycle. These are projects supported by external funding that are designed to give universities and graduate programs tools, data, and information that they can use to support students at different phases of study. And this there are projects that are specific to master's education, some specific to doctoral education, and some that are broad and across all programs. Many of you, if you have been a member of CGS for a while, are familiar with CGS's older work on doctoral completion. The completion study spanned a number of years and was a coordinated effort to collect data using data standards that were adopted by CGS member institutions to use to track student progress through doctoral milestones and completion rates, and also to identify promising practices for supporting PhD students through the degree. More recently, however, we have developed a number of different initiatives that focus on the end of the journey in the areas of professional development, preparing future faculty, and supporting career transitions and pathways for doctoral students as well as master's students. And I'm going to highlight just a couple here. So in the first group of documents, you'll see that CGS has a number of data briefs from our PhD Career Pathways project. This is a project with 70 universities collecting and sharing data on PhD careers. One of the goals of this project is to create greater transparency about PhD career pathways and to inform the decisions of both prospective and current students as they make the transition to their careers. The second group of resources, and there should be another one, the final slide will contain both reports, is focused on professional development for doctoral students. The first that you see there on humanities professional development, and yet another on STEM professional development. And these are focused on designing strong professional development programs for students in these broad fields. And then finally, we have several relatively recent publications, now just a couple of years old, on supporting completion and success of underrepresented minorities in STEM fields. And so we encourage you to look at all of these resources, to use them to inform your own practices on campus, and of course, to learn from your colleagues and deans in the CGS membership. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Janet Rutledge.
I've been talking away. Sorry about that. So good afternoon, everyone. And it's really a pleasure to be part of this webinar today and to share with you some of the activities that we're doing here at UMBC at the final stages of getting people across the finish line. So if I could have the next slide, please. Just to let you know a little bit about our university. We are a mid-sized public university, part of a university system. We have a total enrollment of about 13,500 students, and graduate students form about 19%. We are a doctoral university with high research activity, so that corresponds to being a Research 2, and we have a STEM dominant classification because of the distribution of the degree programs that we have. And you can see on the slide that close to 30% of our graduate students are PhD students, with the remainder being master's and non-degree students. And about 28% of our overall graduate student body is international. On the degree front, we graduate 90 to 95 PhDs a year, 650 masters, and a number of certificate programs. And at the program level, we have 24 PhD programs, 40 master's programs, and 22 certificate programs. Next slide, please. Even though today we're focusing on getting students across the finish line, I do want to say that none of that could be possible without taking a comprehensive approach to student retention and success. And it's important to create a campus environment where this can be true. Many of the activities that we do have been institutionalized from our AGET program that we call Promise, and also from the CGS PhD Completion Project. And I gave the web address for our Promise program if you are interested in taking a look at what some of those activities are. What's really important for the success of these activities is that we have an opportunity to share both what is happening with the graduate school and what's happening in individual departments at our monthly meetings of graduate program directors. And we also share in our graduate program coordinators, because so much of the action happens there, and we have to make sure that we're all working together smoothly. It's important to think about the learning communities that we create, because the research base for what we've been doing, particularly with our Promise AGET program, is on psychological sense of community. And we can talk more about that later if people are interested, but it's important to note that the success happens when you create communities where students can feel like they are a true part of those communities. We also have a strong partnership with our Graduate Student Association, and we published a a short monograph that is available on the CGS website on 10 lessons learned from our inclusiveness initiatives, and many of those initiatives are things that apply to all of our students. Next slide, please. So for example, lessons 5 and 8 in the lessons learned document are about the importance of monitoring student progress and then also celebrating when those milestones are achieved. What we found is really critically important is to have an annual meeting and assessment of progress by faculty for each doctoral student. And this needs to be done with more than just the faculty mentor. In some departments, they have a whole committee that does it. In some, it's the faculty mentor and the graduate program director. And we provide a template that they can use for the assessment, because we do want them to give the student a written assessment as well as having the face-to-face meeting. But the departments are free to use any kind of assessment that they find is most effective for them. Some of our departments have been doing an excellent job of doing this for a long time, and other departments are still coming along to really fully appreciating the value of doing this. The graduate school centrally monitors the milestone deadlines that we have, and so I gave some examples of those. So since we have a mix of full-time and part-time students, we give students 5 years to reach candidacy, and then 4 years after candidacy to finish. Those are for PhD students. And for master students, they have 5 years to graduate. And we monitor that closely. We let the students know when they are reaching their milestone deadline, and if they've passed it, we work with the departments to see whether the student is really on track to graduate, whether they need to be put on a more formal plan, or whether this is a student who really is not going to be able to pursue their degree right now, and we ought to advise them to maybe consider stopping out and coming back when they're oftentimes it's the job responsibilities that they have. But this is something that is really important, because the milestones are what help keep our students moving. And when students are just passing those milestones, we want to be supportive, and it's not so much a policing to try to knock people out, but really to say, is there additional support that is needed to help get the student finished? Next slide, please. Celebrating milestones is something that's really important. And when we first started with the PhD completion project, we realized that a lot of our students didn't know what candidacy meant, and some of our faculty even didn't know what reaching candidacy meant. And so we have been taking the time to really put a spotlight on candidacy and to celebrate reaching candidacy. So what we do is each November, we have a ceremony where all of the students who have reached candidacy in the past year get to walk across the stage with their mentors, because we want to celebrate both the student and the mentor, because it was a lot of work on the mentor's part. And one year, it was funny, we had a mentor go across the stage, and the student wasn't available, but that faculty mentor was really proud and wanted to walk across the stage and accept on behalf of his student. And so this is something that people look forward to. And one of the things that we find is that right before the deadline for reaching candidacy in order to participate in this year's ceremony, we get a bunch of students getting their applications in. And so it's really helped get students paying attention to those milestones, looking forward to the milestones. And one of the things that we have also found that is very important is to encourage family and friends to attend. And this is because in order to be successful, the family has to be supportive of what the student is doing. And what we find is having the family attend helps them to understand what candidacy means and what are the next steps. So during the ceremony and in the program booklet, we share information about what are the next stages in getting from candidacy to being done, and what are the support systems that are available on campus for degree completion. And I'll be talking about more of those for the rest of the presentation. And as I said, students get to understand the milestones and what needs to happen by the deadline. Next slide, please. So Dissertation House is one of our signature programs. And this is something that started as a part of our Promise AGET program, and it's called House because we had a retreat where students from across our university system were housed together by disciplines so that people got to meet students who were within their discipline but from other universities. But we had one house that was for students that were at the dissertation stage and were trying to finish. And so that was called Dissertation House. And people liked the term so much that we continued it even when we moved it to being Dissertation House on campus. So now, twice a year in January and July, which are 2 times when classes are not in session for the most part. We have January terms and we have summer terms, but for graduate students, for the most part, they are not taking classes during that time. And our Dissertation House lasts for 4 full days, and we do provide food, breakfast, lunch, and snacks. And during the Dissertation House, what our dissertation coach does is help break this big dissertation down into manageable units because so many students get stuck and they just are not sure how they're going to get it all done. And we teach the discipline of setting daily goals and how to hold yourself accountable and even to use accountability partners to help keep you accountable toward reaching those goals. And as Dissertation House goes on, some people set really lofty, unreasonable goals. And what Dissertation House does over the days is help students to understand how to set manageable goals, how to set goals that are ambitious enough but are not too ambitious so that they will never be able to meet those goals. There are individual meetings with the dissertation coach that we have, and also there is an online challenge. So we have some people who are not able to come and be there in person, but they are able to participate online, and there are many challenges that happen. And if you go to the Dissertation House link that's below the photo, you'll be able to see some of the online challenges and how people respond. Some other things that we cover are overcoming obstacles to writing. There are presentations from me, from the Associate Dean, from the Counseling Center, the Career Center, just to help students to understand all of the processes and what supports are in place. And then we have follow-up sessions during the year. Sometimes they have a brown bag where people just check in and talk about how they're doing, how they're keeping up with their goal setting and their accountability. And sometimes we have fuller sessions than that. Next slide, please. We have a published paper about the Dissertation House outcomes that you can access from the link there. And one of the things that we found from looking at the data is that participation in Dissertation House increased the likelihood of retention by 64%, but more importantly, increased the likelihood of graduating by 92%. And this was from having a lot of data from students that participated and students that didn't participate. And both of these results were found to be significant statistically. 98% of the students who returned the surveys said that the Dissertation House helped them to make progress on their dissertations. And then finally, this is one of those things that is one of those obvious but not so obvious things, is that, you know, we all talk about the fact that you have a single faculty member, and sometimes they use the committees effectively and sometimes they don't. But what we found is that with the Dissertation House model, that having the dissertation coach and having these others who are part of it are giving multiple mentors that cross disciplines and are helping the student to see their work in context. And that is discussed a little bit more in the paper. Next slide, please. A little bit about our dissertation coach, Dr. Wendy Carter-Veal, seen in the photo there, does coaching sessions throughout the year, doing one-on-one and doing also some group activities. Most of the time, her interactions are electronically by Skype or FaceTime or Google Chat or one of those others. And the biggest things that people need are having discussions about how to make effective schedules for planning how you're going to get things done and get to the finish line. Doing outlines of your work, how do you do appropriate literature reviews? Time management is like on a daily basis. How do you structure the time of your day to get some writing in? And of course, we talked about the goal setting. Accountability partners are, just as they sound, to say that, hey, just like you might have your exercise buddy, this is someone else who's working toward the goals, and you can check in with each other and see, how well are you doing, provide support, encourage them to get other assistance if they need it. Another big area is discussing relationships with faculty advisors. So many students will say, my advisor is ignoring me, my advisor doesn't care about me, and what our dissertation coach does is help them to see life from the faculty member's perspective. And they can go through some role playing to talk through getting what they need and understanding how to do it in a way that the faculty member will respond better. And what many students report is that after going through these exercises, the meetings that they have with their faculty mentor are much more productive, and the faculty member is also very happy about how it's going on. And of course, they talk about preparing for the defense, writing for publications, and promoting wellness. And all of these things are activities that happen with the dissertation coach, but there are also seminars and workshops on those that are open to wide numbers of students. Next slide, please. Just another thing that we want to mention, because this was part of the PhD completion project, and that was the use of exit interviews and exit surveys. And one of the things that we found in our research is that the exit surveys really don't help get at the essence of why students leave, because students put very safe things down on the surveys and don't often open up to what's really happening. And so we said, well, maybe we should just do exit interviews. So adding exit interviews gets a lot more information. But what we found is that you really need to take into account much more data, looking at the progress tracking and understanding what information that we've been having all along and putting that in the context of what they're saying is really far more effective in helping to understand what's going on. And that article is available at the link provided there. Next slide, please. And finally, celebrating completion. And so what you see in the top photo is that every commencement ceremony, and we have 2 per year, the students always know that there's a promise banner. That's for our Promise AGEP, where students can get together and have their picture taken, and they have people that they can celebrate with. And in the bottom, it shows people celebrating with family and friends and faculty and staff. And we even have one case there. You see the person in the red robe, that's from the University of Maryland College Park. And the person behind her is her spouse. And they met as part of the Promise program. But the celebration that we do after commencement is something that people look forward to. So she was graduating the same month from the other university, but she came up to be part of this and put her robe on because she wanted to celebrate, and people really look forward to this. And it's hard to overstate what these kinds of small gatherings can do to really make a difference in the sense of community that people have and how that impacts their success. Thank you very much.
And up next, we have Jan Allen from Cornell University. Jan?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for letting me share what we're doing at Cornell to support students in degree completion. And as I start, I especially want to acknowledge the leadership and support of our dean here, Barbara Newth. So on the next slide, I've provided our graduate school profile showing our enrollment, with 75% of our students here, graduate students here, being doctoral students, the number of degrees we award, and the graduate programs and degrees by number. I also included information about student funding. We're lucky that we provide funding for almost all of our doctoral students, what we call substantial funding, which we define as a minimum of 3 years of doctoral funding. Most students are funded for 5 years, with some programs funding their students for the duration of the program, whether that be 6 years or 7 years. And I'll stop at 7 years. We also strongly encourage our students to apply for external awards, and I'll refer later, I'll just mention later some of the robust resources and support that we provide for students in helping them try to get this external funding. So I think this really does support, to a large degree, our attempts at helping students complete their degree. So on the next slide, I've just listed the initiatives that I'll talk about today that reflect 2 of our core values here, and that is to create community and provide support for students, multiple forms of support at key points throughout their program, but especially as they write their dissertation and move through the final stages of degree completion. I'll talk briefly about each of these, but specifically as they address students' need for community, for funding, and for the psychological support to address, in particular, the isolation and the need for guidance that our dissertation writing students report that they need. Okay, on the next slide, explains what we do to welcome students to the research and dissertation writing stage. Once they complete their candidacy exam, the dean sends a congratulatory letter to students. It's a kind of low-cost, low-effort attempt to welcome students into this community of candidates for the degree. And in the letter, we offer students either a print copy or we let them download through the link a book that we developed in 2010 with generous support from the Council of Graduate Schools. It's a guide to completing the dissertation phase of doctoral study. And we point out this book and the other offices and people and services that are offered to help students during this stage. For example, during this summer, we sent out 167 letters to students who completed the candidacy exam just in the summer. And as you can imagine, with a deadline for doing so, being the start of fall semester, which was August 29th, 80 of those students completed in the month of August. So although we're envious of Janet and her reception, and we've already started talking about whether we can do that. So when you receive this slide, I've hyperlinked the title of the book so that you can click on that, download it, and share it freely with your students if you wish, and we hope you will. On the next slide, I've shown the writing support services we offer. About 5 years ago, we developed a very strong and robust English language support office that provides an array of services to students that includes 4-credit and non-credit courses, conversation hours, workshops, tutoring, consultation, and a lot of socialization opportunities for students who are non-native English speakers. About half of our graduate enrollment is now international students. And so our office, with a director and a staff of 2, with other graduate student staff, work with students on writing, on presentations, and on pronunciation. So students use this throughout their, international students use this throughout their time here at Cornell. But it becomes especially important as they're beginning to focus more and more and then solely on writing the dissertation. About 10 years ago, we started at the Writing Center on campus a graduate writing service. Prior to that, it was an undergraduate-focused office only. And we started and continue to fund each semester a graduate writing service that provides individual in-person and then online consultations to our graduate students on any type of writing. And we really do encourage students to start using the service early on so that they have made it a habit when they get to the dissertation writing stage, that it's a normal part, a normalized part of their writing practice to use consultants and reviewers for their writing at the dissertation stage. We also offer fellowship application writing workshops. We encourage all students to write fellowship applications even prior to finding something that they're eligible or being ready, feeling ready to apply for something, because it's also good writing experience in developing the practice and habit of writing. We offer workshops, panels of current successful fellows, and also peer review consultations. And we just finished that up last week for fall semester. We're very pleased. And then I'll just mention briefly the dissertation writing boot camp. The dissertation house at UMBC predates our dissertation writing boot camp here. We've been doing it for about 7 years. Our signature event is actually a 6-day event beginning on a Friday and running through the next week. But we also have offered 2- and 3-day and 5-day versions of this, where we have students in cohorts of 10, but sometimes up to 80 students at one time, going through a boot camp where they focus on many of the same topics that Janet mentioned. They're focusing on becoming more productive writers, managing any challenges, and also creating a community, a support community for after boot camp is over. Once we determined how successful these were, we began offering monthly reboots, and a student came up with that name. I didn't, but I think it's the perfect name. Monthly reboots for alums of boot camp, students who are still writing on their dissertation who have not yet completed, to get back together and write together once a month, where they can also report on their progress and help us help them address new obstacles. We also provide food. On occasion, we have provided neck and hand massages, which have been quite popular. We also focus, though, on helping students understand themselves more as writers and their process for writing, and how they can become a more productive writer with the strengths and skills they already have. Over the lunchtime sessions, we invite them to suggest a topic that they want to talk about, such as preparing a dissertation for formatting and submission, preparing for the defense, and just how to cope with the added pressures of being on the job market at the same time you're writing your dissertation, which of course students report to us, 2 full-time jobs. Students have repeatedly said to me, we appreciate the food and the space and the advice, but it's the peer support and peer pressure. I remind them that the peer pressure is really the need for accountability, but the peer support and peer pressure that they feel is really what helped them be most productive. We also, after starting boot camp here, began to do every morning when classes are in session, graduate write-ins, where we take the top floor, and the image here is the top floor of our Graduate Student Center, affectionately called the Big Red Barn at Cornell, where students can come and write. They need to sign in with their goals for the day, and they need to sign out by telling us what they achieved and accomplished that day. But they write as a supportive writing community where we provide free coffee and tea, and they can expect to have this community there every day when classes are in session. We've done extensive program evaluation, and I think one question we can stop asking is, would you have been more or less productive writing at home or writing in the library or writing in your lab or your office? Because 100% of the students, and we have about 100 to 125 students per year go through a boot camp of some sort, which means a multi-day writing event from 2 to 6 days. 100% of the students report they are much more productive during boot camp. And in addition to multiple ways we ask them to report on their productivity, we ask students about how they're able to deal with issues of procrastination, scheduling their writing, increasing their motivation, accountability, addressing their fear and anxiety about writing, and managing perfectionistic tendencies. We do a somewhat extensive needs assessment prior to boot camp when students apply. So we tailor the boot camp to what they have said are the biggest obstacles for them, and then we use those things to assess the individual boot camp, and I'm happy to answer more questions about that later. I know that many of you are also doing writing boot camps, writing retreats, writing events, and you've been great at sharing your resources with us. So thank you for that. And I guess I should say we're all envious, or certainly I am envious of Queen's University in Ontario, who calls their boot camp Dissertation on the Lake, where they truly put their students in a bus and take them to a lake, and we all want to be doing that. And I'll just mention, throughout the year we also do writing workshops, and started 2 years ago doing writing book clubs, where we use various books about writing management, writing productivity, and bring students together just over a meal, lunch or supper, to just talk more about their writing anxiety. It's a very normalizing experience for them to do this, and even in these short periods of time, we think it's been very helpful. Okay, on the next slide, I want to briefly mention the funding support that we provide. The first particularly helps students who are either first gen from underrepresented minority group, who were undergraduate McNair or Mellon May scholars, or who in some way overcame a significant challenge in their path to graduate school. Our Provost Diversity Fellowships for advanced doctoral students are available in a very competitive application process to any student once they pass the Candidacy Exam. It is a one-term, either fall or spring or summer fellowship. It's not just limited to students who expect to finish their dissertation during that one semester, but it can support students throughout who really make a strong case for needing a fellowship as opposed to a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship, and especially for students who are beyond the commitment of funding that the university has made to them. We award about 20 of these competitive fellowships each year. And I think one of the very important parts of the process is that students are required to submit a plan for their degree completion, which is always a very good thought process for all students. And they have to include a mentoring plan so that their advisor and the multiple mentors that they might be using to support them through graduate school weigh in, including with what kind of support they'll provide. I'll also mention we offer a greatly reduced in absentia tuition for any student who will be studying or doing research or writing their dissertation 100 miles or more away from Ithaca. This is the very low price of tuition of $200 per semester. And I think this goes back further than any of us can remember, at least 20 years that it was, and it hasn't been raised, $200 per semester. And it's for those students in the 6th and 7th year who may be beyond their 5 years of funding commitment from us, who are now self-paying. And so it allows them, if they're working away, writing away, studying away, to pay very reduced tuition and still be considered a registered student, so they have access to all online resources. We also have a, I misspoke. It's the next thing listed here, the advanced self-pay doctoral students who pay the $17.50 per semester. Any of our students can pay the reduced in absentia tuition of $200 a semester. And if that was totally confusing, I'll be glad to answer questions about it later. But we also look at what are we doing and what can we do to provide support in terms of financial aid and funding to support degree completion. Okay, on the next slide, I didn't want to fail to mention our own increasing awareness of the psychological distress that many students experience in graduate school, but especially during their dissertation writing. Arriving for graduate school, students have many group and cohort experiences. This year we brought 1,100 of them together for group orientation one day. They have group experiences in the coursework phase, when they work in a lab or with their research group. But I fear we sometimes persist with these explicit or implicit messages to students that at the writing stage, it's a solitary activity. Many of you know the work of our graduate school colleague, Chris Goldie at Stanford, who reminds us in this analogy she frequently uses that dissertation writing should really be viewed as a team sport with advisors, with reviewers, with editors, with friends and family, all playing important support roles. So with that in mind, we try to work closely with our campus health center. I've listed the support groups they're currently offering for graduate students, and they regularly work with us and work with students to assess students' needs or at student requests to add new groups. In the graduate school, we offer a number of events, as you all do, that at their core are community building events. And as we do these events, they serve as focus groups for us to help us learn about, as graduate students, talk about their experience as a graduate student and what obstacles they're encountering. We start early on. Pie with the Deans was designed 2 years ago for first-year students until advanced graduate students said, well, we like Pie and we like the Deans, so could we come? And so now it's open to anybody. But it's an opportunity for us to, at least a monthly basis, find out what graduate students are experiencing, thinking, and what they want us to know about that experience. We have a number of student groups on campus and student clubs. Our GPSA, which is our Graduate and Professional Student Association, our governance group on campus. We try to work closely with all of those. Various of us in the graduate school serve as liaison to each one of these groups on campus to make sure we have a constant source of input into how we can do a better job of helping our students develop resilience and how we can be providing more support in that area. I also want to mention along this line, on Friday, we walked out of the graduate school and we're reminded how lucky we were to be here at Cornell when we had therapy cows, therapy lambs, and a therapy rabbit right outside our door on the Ag Quad. I'm not making this up. And with our vet school here, just a short walk away, we don't lack for a campus full of therapy dogs in training. And I know many of you have activities and resources like this. And so I think we all find our students at a time when all of these support services for helping students cope and create resilience and practices of well-being are important. And I want to mention, just a brief mention, but they're also very important because I know many of you have similar resources, but these become even more critical for students as they're in their final steps of degree completion. Career services and resources are essential for students trying to complete a dissertation and be on the postdoc market or looking for a job in academia, government, or industry. Cornell is one of 37 research universities that has a CERTL program, a Center for the Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning. CERTL programs help students prepare for STEM future faculty positions through workshops, individual support for students as they prepare their job search materials and move into faculty roles. And then I know some of you also have BEST programs. We're now calling our BEST program Careers Beyond Academia to provide support for students across all graduate disciplines looking for non-academic jobs. And so we really try to make these programs very visible to our students so that they know there are even more resources outside their own graduate program and outside the graduate school for helping them through this time of challenge. We believe we have a lot to offer students, but like you, we continue to work with students so we can identify the additional resources and provide group and individual support for them at the dissertation stage and through completion. And then on my final slide, I've just added contact information in case you want to contact me to chat, or I'll be happy to send you any of the, particularly the writing resources that we have developed here. We're happy to share them with you as you have shared resources with us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet and Jan, for your thoughtful presentation. Just two quick technical reminders before we get into the question and answer session. A reminder that the webinar recording and slides will be emailed to participants and posted on the CGS website within a week of the live webinar. And then if you have a question that you'd like to submit for the Q&A session, please do submit it now in the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. And now I'll hand over the question and answer session to my colleague, Julia Kent.
Thanks, Matt. I think Matt's going to be opening up your questions right now. And we'll jump in with questions. This one is for Jan. The question is, what unit at Cornell oversees your Graduate Writing Center? Who is the staff or provides writing support for graduate students?
Thank you. My handwritten note that says unmute in capital letters wasn't working then. Our Knight Center for Writing in the Disciplines, which is hosted and housed by the College of Arts and Sciences, offers the graduate writing service. We provide the funding, but the staff there, who are all employees in the Writing Center in College of Arts and Sciences, hire graduate students as the peer tutors and consultants. Great,
thank you. We have a number of questions about who provides what kind of support. One question for both of you, actually, the question just disappeared. Oh, what was the process for getting your institutions to provide the funding and infrastructure for the programs you described? Jan, you've already said a little bit, but Janet, could you speak a little bit more about this?
Sure. We were very fortunate to get external grant funding to prove that these particular activities were worthwhile doing. And so after the grant period ended, then we had the data to say this is effective, and we're able to get the funding to do that. One of the things that we did to really fund all of the comprehensive activities that we do is something called a matriculation fee. And this was something that the graduate students themselves, through our Graduate Student Association, voted to impose so that we could continue offering the services. We also get some money through the annual fund from the university, in particular for our dissertation house and also for our dissertation completion fellowships. And so that's something that's also very helpful.
And Jan, do you want to add some more about making the case for resources?
Two things I'll mention. When Barb Newth came in 10 years ago, I think she did, as dean, graduate dean, I think she did a stellar job coming in with a vision and negotiating to have new resources that had not been in the graduate school before. So any of you who are hiring a new graduate dean or moving into a graduate dean position, come in with a list of what you need, and that's the best time to have the provost and president support you in that. We do, again, under Barb's leadership, a lot of evidence-based planning here. We do a lot of assessment of our programs, both needs assessment and assessment of the programs we're actually doing. And I think it's been easy for us, both with external funds and external funding, to make a case for that. Again, we can share some of those ideas with you later. We're happy to do that.
Thank you. I have another question for both of you. Maybe we can start again with Janet. What is the staffing model and or campus partner model to deliver the dissertation coaching and boot camps?
Well, first I'd have to say that a lot of the activities that we did were thanks to Dr. Renetta Tull, who many of you may have heard speak. Unfortunately, she has now moved on to UC Davis. And so her role was, and we have a new person who will be coming in very soon that we're very excited about. Her role was to be over graduate student development and postdoctoral affairs, as well as our grants such as the Promise AGEP. And so with that, we have our dissertation coach is one person. We have a staff coordinator who is 50% time on this and 50% on some other activities. And we have 2 graduate students that work with our activities. But then we rely very heavily on faculty and staff at the university, and then there are also partners at the other area universities that also have their own programming, and we often do things together as a university system.
Great, thank you. Jan?
So I'll give a little bit of history and context to this. I actually started doing dissertation writing boot camp when I worked at Columbia University in the graduate school before coming here, and we modeled our boot camp there on the Stanford model and the University of Pennsylvania model, and they worked closely with their writing center to have the writing center staff do the primary hosting and implementation of their boot camp. I happen to know that as different graduate schools have done boot camps, they've used lots of different models. Both at Columbia and here at Cornell, I do the presenting of the boot camp. As one of my colleagues says, it's one of the things that feeds my soul. Selfishly, it's a focus group for me. I get to know graduate students in ways that I wouldn't normally do just in my role as associate dean. And we get great feedback, both pre-camp, pre-event assessment, and evaluation afterwards. And so right now, while the graduate school is doing the boot camp and covering all the costs, we do bring in partners from the library, from our campus health center, and from other units on campus when we feel like, and the writing center, to speak during the lunch, because we feel like it truly is a partnership and a team effort.
Great.
And
Thanks.
I want to say one more thing, just thinking about the title of that article that I referenced earlier, University as Mentor. I think the underlying theme that you're hearing here is that we try to pull in people from across the universities, both the comments that Jan made and the things that I've shared, is that it is really critically important that this not be seen as just something the graduate school does. This is something that is an effort of the whole university.
Great. Thank you for those answers. I have another question for UMBC. What is the process for the annual meeting and assessment of progress by the mentors? And by annual meeting, I think this person means the meeting where a faculty member assess how well students are doing in the program, and not the large meeting to celebrate milestones. Who attends these progress update meetings, and what is the method used to record and collect the feedback?
This is something that is run by the Associate Dean of our graduate school, Jeff Halverson, and we remind the programs that this is a requirement. And any graduate student who is supported on a graduate assistantship, that's required by our university system to have the annual review on how they're doing with their assistantship, and some of them go hand in hand. And so we ask them, we used to ask them to share them with us, but that really wasn't as useful an exercise because we weren't able to process all of that information coming in. And so we ask them to to keep it. We ask our students, we make sure that they understand that this is supposed to happen, and if it's not happening, to request it and to let us know if it is not happening. And we talk about what people are finding. And some of our departments that are doing a particularly good job will share out the processes that they do involving many more faculty, and even talking about them at department meetings for helping them to see what they need to be improving in their program if there are underlying patterns that seem to come forward.
Great. Thank you.
Julia,
yeah.
Julia, may I add to that just very quickly, with a doctoral population the size of ours, and the realization that here at Cornell, a number of different graduate programs were doing their own student progress review in various kinds of formats at various times throughout the year using various questions. About 2 years ago, the development took longer than that, but about 2 years ago, we started with an online, electronic student annual review that's now required for all doctoral students. And it's done all electronically, where students complete their self-assessment, where faculty advisors are notified that it is now time for them to go into the online form and complete their evaluation. And then for those students, students are rated as, there's qualitative, there's narrative information in there as well, but the rating is students are doing a satisfactory job, an unsatisfactory job, or that they need improvement. And for the students who are unsatisfactory, then we in the graduate school, we write to those students and again offer the resources and services we offer. And for that small, it is a small number of students who receive an unsatisfactory ranking. I don't want to say penalty, but they're told they should come meet with me in my role as associate dean, so that we can really find out what's going on, where are the problems at the root of this, and how we can help them with that. And we've been very pleased with this. We developed an online system that allowed questions to be tailored to each field. So if they were already doing something and they wanted to include their own questions, we could do that. And again, if somebody wants more information, I can connect you with the people here who designed it and who are overseeing it. We think it's great.
Thank you so much, Jan and Janet. I'm going to turn it back over to Matt.
Okay. Well, we'd like to say thanks again to DoctoralNet for sponsoring in part the broadcast of the webinar. DoctoralNet Ltd. provides professional and research development for master's and doctoral services across 10 topic areas and throughout a suite of services. Now servicing 65,000 students, they also provide positive revenue generation for the universities to which they provide services. You can write Alana at doctoralnet.com for a demo. Please note that a handout regarding professional development for graduate students is in the right control panel. Questions? Email DoctoralNet at Alana, A-L-A-N-A, at doctoralnet.com. We'd like to thank the audience for joining us today, as well as the wonderful presentations by Jan and Janet. We'd also like to let you all know about upcoming CGS webinars. A sponsored webinar, The Benefits of a Community Approach to Graduate Admissions, on Thursday, October 31st from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern, and then Preparing Future Faculty to Assess Student Learning. And that'll be on Friday, November 1st from 2 to 3 p.m. And as always, you can find a complete list of our upcoming webinars as well as recorded webinars at the URL below. Thank you all so much for being a great audience, and we'll see you next time.